Hello, welcome once again to Leto's Law. I'm Steve Leto. One of the most requested things on my channel. More people have asked me this than anything else. They say, Steve, what are your opinions and thoughts on the movie My Cousin Vinny? I've mentioned before my favorite lawyer movie or my favorite law movie is Anatomy of a Murder. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's an oldie, it's black and white, but it's well worth the watch. People have asked me what's my least favorite legal movie, and I've said it's Double Jeopardy, which in my mind is idiotic. I've had people say, Steve, you didn't get the movie. I don't care if I got it or not. That's my least favorite movie. If you ask me that, that's what I'll tell you. So people then say, well, Steve, what about My Cousin Vinny? And I'll tell you, I love the movie. I think My Cousin Vinny's a great movie. But people, of course, are asking me that for my legal opinions about the movie, and I'll tell you. It's actually a pretty good movie as far as that goes, too, although there's some oddities there, which I'll talk about. My Cousin Vinny came out in 1992, and I'm not going to get all at the movies with you here, but Jonathan Lynn, who wrote it, apparently has a law degree. I read that someplace. And that explains why he got a lot of the legal stuff very, very right. And some of the other stuff that's put in for entertainment or comedic purposes is actually pretty good too. Meaning that this is all stuff that could have happened. And I've read different articles by people who said, I'm an attorney. I watched this one thing that happened here reminded me of something that happened in one of my cases. So, to have all this crazy stuff happen on one case happens in the movies. And, movies can do that, but it's a comedy. So, it's an interesting movie in that respect. I hope you've seen it. If you haven't, I'd encourage you to go watch it. Jonathan Lynn also wrote Nuns on the Run and Clue. So I suspect that this is a, a higher point on his resume. But, of course, Fred Gwynne's in the movie, plays the judge, Herman Munster, with the great voice. And, of course, he asks Vinny what he's talking about when he says about the Utes. The Utes. So that scene right there is worth the price of admission. One of the greatest things, of course, about the movie is the fact that I believe it's set in Alabama. And the guys are from New York, and they're driving through, and they run afoul of the law. And so when Vinny comes down to represent one of them, he's from New York, of course, fish out of water and all that. And he brings along Marissa Tomei, who is his wife. And one of the greatest things that I think is portrayed in the movie is the idea about, and I've said this before, about being hometowned. I've gone to court before in a place that's far away from where I live. And you walk into a small town court several counties away, and you discover that everyone knows everyone except for you. No one knows you. You don't know anyone. And then you discover these people are all like, giving each other noogies and stuff. And I mean, it can be very, very disconcerting. And so we like to think the legal system has a level playing field where, we go in and the laws are what make us equal. And you discover that, no. What makes you equal is if you're married to the clerk who's also the sister of the judge who, so, and those things do happen. One of my favorite stories, I've mentioned it before. I went to court one time. My opposing counsel showed up in court wearing like an Izod shirt, Dockers, and some boat shoes. No jacket, no tie. And I looked around and I realized that the people who I assumed were litigants, many of them were probably attorneys who just, in this courtroom, we don't dress up. It's like, what? Yes, you do. You're supposed to. But a lot of funny things in the movie, and most of it, like I said, was stuff that could have happened. But like, for instance, remember that the judge admonishes Vinny in his opening statement because he's arguing too much. And it's an opening statement and a closing argument. You're not supposed to make argument in your opening statement. You're supposed to stick to the facts. Many good attorneys can argue but make it seem like they're sticking to the facts. But of course, Vinny's supposed to be a young attorney, and that is a great demonstration of that. So, that kind of stuff does happen. One of the more interesting aspects of the movie that people always ask me about is the fact that Marissa Tomei's character, Mona Lisa, is asked to testify as an expert witness. And people ask me about expert witnesses, and a fact witness is somebody who sees something. You saw something happen, and it's important. You might get subpoenaed, brought into court, and asked to testify as to what you saw. Expert witnesses are hired, and they look at something and they render an opinion on it. Everything from a doctor might be brought in to do an independent medical examination of somebody to see how bad their injuries are. An accident reconstructionist might look at all the documents in a file and come to some conclusions about how an accident took place. And they're brought in and they're allowed to get in front of a jury. And if they're qualified, they can render opinions, which are presented as opinions. So an expert witness, after laying the foundation and being asked all the right questions, will say, in my opinion, and then they'll state their opinion. And a jury is then told, if you choose to believe the opinion, you can do so and use it for whatever it's worth. Okay? Give whatever weight you want to it. So Mona Lisa gets on the stand, and Vinny suggests that she's going to be an expert witness on general automotive stuff. Okay? And now people say, well, could she have been qualified as an expert witness? And there's all kinds of debates on this because there's standards as to what you need to do to be qualified as an expert and what kind of basis you've got to put into the evidence to lay the foundation for the expertise to be introduced into evidence. And I've actually seen websites that discuss this, and they talk about how the year after this movie came out, the Supreme Court issued a new ruling regarding the standards for expertise. So before that ruling came out, it's one thing, after it's another thing, and it's all moot. It's all moot, meaning it's meaningless. Because if you remember in the movie, Vinny puts her on the stand, and the prosecutor says, Your Honor, I'd like to voir dire the witness. And you can voir dire the witness to ask the witness questions to get at their expertise to see if they're an appropriate expert. Now, in the movie, they do this wrong because in the movie, they would not voir dire the witness, most likely in front of the jury. They'd remove the jury and do the voir dire separately. But we got to speed things along because, film's expensive. So he voir dires her and he asks her a bunch of questions. And at the very end, he asks her the question about the small block Chevy and the small block Chevy engine in the Bel Air. Okay. And she goes, it's a trick question. They didn't have a 327 in that year. Prosecutor then says, Your Honor, she's fine with me. So the prosecutor conceded that she was a witness. And by stipulating or agreeing to let her be a witness, he's removed his objection. And the court could, if it wanted to, chosen to continue the voir dire on its own. But hey, if the defense wants to use this expert and the prosecution agrees to it, the expert gets to testify. So that's an interesting legal issue that a lot of people apparently missed. But when the prosecutor conceded to letting her testify, then she gets to testify. And generally speaking, experts can render opinions on things in which they might have more specialized knowledge than the average person. And you recall, and again, this is a spoiler, so if you don't want spoilers, haven't seen the movie yet, stop it now. But one of the keys to all of this was whether or not the vehicle that was used in the getaway had positive traction in its rear end, which would allow it to put down 2 tracks of rubber, as opposed to non-positive traction, which would put down 1 track of rubber, if any. So Marissa Tomei then testified about that. So that's the interesting issue about her testimony, is the fact that she was used as an expert, but although the prosecution had originally objected, they then withdrew the objection, so she got to testify. Elsewhere in the movie, I believe that Vinny asked to have her made a hostile witness. And I've had people ask what that means. And generally speaking, if there's a witness on the stand, if you call a witness to the stand, you are supposed to not cross-examine them and not ask them leading questions. So you can ask them basic questions, but you can't ask them questions that put the answer in their mouth. Isn't it true that you did this? That's a leading question. What did you do yesterday? That's a non-leading question. So if you put a witness on the stand who goes hostile on you, meaning that they're like purposely being difficult, you can ask the court to deem that person a hostile witness, even though you called them. And the court will use its discretion. And if the court deems somebody a hostile witness, despite the fact that you called them, the court can say, yes, they're hostile. You can ask leading questions. And then the court will tell the person, you might not like these questions, but you better answer them. And then, of course, if it gets ugly beyond that point, then you might be looking at things like contempt and so on, but that's a different matter altogether. Another great moment in the movie, of course, is when they're being interviewed by the police after they've been arrested. They don't know why they've been arrested. And one of them, I think it's Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid, is being talked to by the sheriff. And he goes, wait, you think I shot the guy? And somebody sticks their head in the door and they go, hey, you almost done? And the sheriff goes, hang on, I'm taking a confession here. Because he just said, you think I shot the guy? And when the sheriff takes the stand, he pulls out his notes and goes, yeah, he said, quote, I shot the guy, which he had said. Now, it wasn't a complete recitation of the statement, but he had said, you think I shot the guy? What, you're saying I shot the guy? And that was, in fact, part of what he said. I shot the guy. It just was preceded by, you think I shot the guy? Or so funny, but that kind of stuff can happen also. One of the other things, and this is what really bothered, if you said, Steve, what bothered you the most about the movie, was the fact that Vinny actually said something very, very stupid, remarkably stupid. And I understand that he's supposed to be a little bit, I mean, but and it's a comedy. But at one point in time, he says, I wish I knew what the prosecution had on our guys. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what they had in their files. And somewhere along in the movie, the prosecution goes, oh, you want to see what's in our files? We'll give them to you. And he makes a copy of the files and gives them to Vinny. And Vinny acts like it's Christmas. And of course, as any attorney will tell you, the prosecution is required under a case called Brady to turn over all of its materials, non-work product, but the actual materials, the actual evidence, whether it's good or bad, to the other side to let the defense prepare for the prosecution. And so in any case like this, the prosecution is required to give that stuff. And Vinny would have known that if he'd gone to law school. And now I know people say, well, Steve, what if he just, fell asleep that day? Well, the idea that you get stuff from the other side in a case, in a criminal setting in particular, would be covered in a class called criminal procedure. And that is such a fundamental right you have in America. There's no way you missed that. That's like saying, wait, I'm entitled to a phone call? Says who? Everyone knows that. And so any attorney would know that you get access to prosecution's files with respect to the prosecution materials, not their work product, not the stuff that they've generated, like opinion memos and stuff like that, but any evidence, you would be turned over. Victim statements and photographs and things like that would be turned over to the defense, and he would have known that. And there is a scene in the movie where his wife, Marissa Tomei, turns to him and said, "Didn't they teach that to you in law school?" And it's a great question because they did. They would have. And Vinny goes, "No, they teach us contracts and stuff." Well, yeah, they teach contracts in a class called contracts. You would have taken a class called criminal procedure. And there are core classes that you're required to take. And I suspect that contracts is one of them, but so is criminal procedure. So he would have taken criminal procedure, and it's not missing a day. It would be like missing a month. And most law schools wouldn't allow you to miss a month of school and then allow you to pass, especially because you still have to pass that class. And trust me, that would be on the exam. So generally speaking, My Cousin Vinny, very funny movie. I believe pretty realistic in terms of all the stuff that happened, could have happened. And of course, a very, very funny movie. Like I said, a couple little oddball things in it. But like I said, as far as legal comedies go, yeah, it's my number one legal comedy movie. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on My Cousin Vinny. Any questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.